Hey everybody, recording live today for the podcast, and I have a very special guest, one of my favorites. She is a client of mine from Let Love In. Her name is Erin Szaroleta, and she is not only a personal trainer, but she's also a nutritionist. And I just found, or nutrition coach, I should say. And why I asked Erin to come on was not just to talk about Let Love In, but the transformation that she's had in her own life has been really something special. And I say that she's one of my favorites because the energy that she brings to all of life, not only just what we did with coaching, but what she brings to her business. I thought, oftentimes, and Erin and I talked about this right before, is we both said that our intention for today is that we really want somebody who needs to hear this message see themselves in Erin's story. So Erin, pumped to have you on, baby.
Yeah. So thank you for having me. Also, you promised me a dance party and we haven't had one of those yet.
Oh, well then let's just go ahead and break it down. Seriously. I told her, you guys, right before we recorded, I left a voice memo and I was like, hey, here's what we're going to cover on the podcast. Like, just be your bad self. And by the way, we're going to have a dance party. So stretch out. And that was like the last thing I said before I got off the phone. I cracked myself up, Erin.
Just so everyone knows, we're just going to talk about 90s R&B today. That's it.
Oh my God, did I tell you that I started watching 90210 again?
Yes.
I literally was like Shazamming songs on 90210 and I was like, yes, I love Color Me Bad. I want to sex you up. Like, who doesn't?
Oh my gosh.
That is really, absolutely. I think, where we bonded was 90s hip hop and R&B.
Totally.
And then just a desire for personal development and dance moves and great television on Netflix.
1,000%. That's really what life is all about, right? I can insert any lyric into any average conversation and make it totally dorky, and I think I'm funny, so it's great.
100%. Like, I always say, if you don't think you're funny, no one else will. So that's why I always laugh at myself. And I think you do the same exact thing. And it's 1,000%. True. You can literally take any 90s lyric and pull it into your life. I think I rap a lot on the podcast.
Yeah, probably do. Right. You're going to you're starting to start getting tagged under like 90s hip hop music podcast.
Honestly, that should be my hashtag. Instead of hashtag Let Love In, hashtag Anything for Love podcast, it should be hashtag 90s R&B, hashtag 90s hip hop.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Did you ever watch the Jimmy Fallon, Justin Timberlake hashtag series when they were like taking their face?
Of course. Yes. That's why I did that physically. I know they can't see it on the podcast, but I'm doing that right now.
If they're watching it on YouTube, they're gonna know what's up. They're gonna hashtag us back.
Definitely.
Well, let's get right into it, sister. I mean, our journey started with you listening to the podcast, and I didn't realize that until we just were catching up a few minutes before. So tell me how you found the podcast and like what was sort of your first interactions with it.
Yeah, the podcast was the solidifier for me. It was the hands down, this is the first time I felt heard in, I would say anything that was my voice and the thoughts in my head and the feelings in my heart that were, I was listening to them live going, oh my God, this is me. So I found you through a mutual friend, who I think had found you through a mutual friend, just kind of a crazy set of events. And I went to your Instagram and I was watching one of your lives. And I was like, okay, I can totally dig this. And you mentioned your podcast. I'm like, I'm in. Okay, cool. And I spent that entire next weekend binging. I think it was I started from episode 1 and went all the way through to episode 6. And there was no doubt in my mind that I needed to talk with you. And so I messaged you and we had a consult and the rest is history. And it was absolutely from the first time that I talked to you, I knew that it was something that I had to do based on where I was in my life and what I was. And I'm going to say more importantly, what I was not feeling.
So where were you in your life and what were you not feeling?
So for me personally, and this was also this needs to be under the cloud of this all happened in the middle of a pandemic, which is so wild, because I think that all of us have our own personal experiences with that. But I was in a long-term relationship, and for me, it was around 4 years. And I had been married previously, but in this relationship, there were just things that didn't quite feel right. and I was feeling kind of lost in, I'm trying to fix everything and nothing's really getting fixed, and I'm not very satisfied, and I want to quit my job because I love personal training, but I hate what it makes me do and how I wasn't getting anything out of it. And I was totally exhausted in my professional life. I was exhausted in my personal life, and I didn't feel like I had anywhere to go. And I had people close to me in my life say that I wasn't very emotionally intelligent. And for me, that was like a dagger in my heart, going like, I don't even know what that means, but that's not true,
Yeah.
And what brought me to you, and one of the things that I really wanted to work on, was being able to identify my feelings, because I would have fights with my significant other, or I would have a hard conversation with someone who was close to me, and I would stumble over my words, and I'd be like, you know what I mean, but I don't really have the words for it, but this is kind of what I'm feeling. And it was all over the place. I was not able to identify my feelings. I was not able to identify any sort of patterns. I didn't know who I was. I just kind of felt like I was flailing.
It's really funny how our stories are very similar. And I don't know that I picked up on that when we first started talking, is because, for me, I remember getting the kind of dagger in my heart at work when somebody was like, you're not self-aware. And I was like, what the? I'm like the most conscientious person of everyone else's feelings, AKA I was a people pleaser. And
Yes.
I'm so conscientious of everyone else's feelings. How dare you say that I'm not self-aware? And what he didn't know at the time when he shared that with me is that I had started in 12-step recovery through Al-Anon, and was in the middle of an emotionally, well, this isn't your story, but I was in an emotionally and physically abusive relationship. And I was in the midst of leaving, because what resonated with me with what you just shared was, I felt like I didn't really know myself. Like, I was like, professionally, I wasn't accelerating. I was feeling pretty burnt out and overwhelmed, but yet I should, quote unquote, should feel grateful that I have money and that I have a job, and that, like, I have a car. Like, I should be grateful for these things. But I ultimately didn't feel that way, because my personal life was a mess and my professional life was a mess. And I just didn't feel like I knew myself. And I too couldn't identify my feelings. And I think as you were sharing that, I was thinking back to a question that I asked you every time we jumped onto our private coaching sessions, was, how are you feeling today? And, oftentimes I think you would go into a story and I'd be like, oh, okay. Do you think we could just pause for a second and like actually go over to the feelingswheel.com and identify like what are the 3 feelings that are coming up? And I remember you so distinctively being like, that tool is really helpful, because when I know my feelings, I can actually relay the stories of why I feel that way.
1,000%. Yeah. The feelingswheel.com was, quote unquote, a game changer for me, and that was the place that I had to start unpacking all of this stuff. And I'm shaking my head over here, when you were sharing about one of the things that, or I guess 2 of the things for me, I didn't know who I was. And I wasn't going around going like, I wish I knew who I am. I want to be on this journey to figure out who I am. But there would be conversations with people who were relatively introspective in my life. And it was kind of like, mainly authority figures or teachers. I could hear a teacher going like, who is Erin? And I always thought that was so weird. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, who is Erin? What is she like? I was like, I like mac and cheese and I like soccer. Like, what else do you want to know? And I didn't even know that this journey of identifying my feelings and identifying these patterns and why I feel the way that I feel. And I know you and I have talked about this before too, to kind of step back a little bit, when you talked about kind of a little bit of like how you're raised. Like in my world as a kid, it was, okay, well, you're going to go to school, you're going to get good grades, and then you're going to graduate with honors, and then you're going to find a good boy who will take care of you, who has a good job, and then you'll live the rest of your life in happiness. And I was like, as soon as I became a teenager, I was like, I don't know. No, I don't want that. You know what I mean? And for me, and we don't necessarily have to dive a whole lot into it, but for me, my sexuality really played a part in it, because when I discovered that I was gay, and at like, in my early 20s, late teens, early 20s, I was like, Well, throw that plan out the window, because I'm not doing that, So then it was like, now what? There's rules that I was supposed to follow. I'm not following. So who's going to chart my path? Me, I guess.
And I think without any direction, obviously, because when you start to, I mean, I think I said this to you at the beginning. I think we start to try to figure out, how do we accept ourselves, and then how do we get acceptance from others? And when our path is different from that of what our parents said they wanted it to be for us, anywhere from going to school versus not, versus like who you're fucking attracted to, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, nobody wrote a playbook for that. And so I think a lot of people can identify with this feeling of like, so I did something different than my parents wanted for me, and do they love and accept me for that? And the stories that we tell ourselves. I'm so glad you went here, by the way, because I was about to say to you, like, I'm not gonna, I mean, it's an interesting conversation to have post coaching, because I know so much about you, but I think I really love that you brought that up about the family dynamic and you being a gay woman, because I think so much of our identity is in this cookie cutter box of what our parents really wanted us to be. And when we're not that, there's the stories that we can tell ourselves about, well, are they going to love me? And there's a lot of shame that I think gets layered in.
Yes, absolutely. When you nailed it when you said 2 words, love and acceptance. So as a teenager, in the formidable years of, late teens, early 20s, when you think you know it all, but you don't, and this incredibly challenging thing happens in your life of going, okay, my world just got turned upside down. Where is that love and acceptance coming from? And I wanted so badly to find it in the people that were close to me, and it was a challenging, and I'm not throwing anyone under the bus here, but it was a very challenging time for everyone in my life, including myself. And so forming who I was, not knowing that, going into those early 20s, mid 20s years. And even now I'm 38, and it's like all of these things that I'm still discovering about who I am. And that, and I joke with you about this. We've talked about this before. Ain't nobody going to love you like you love you. And it's like, you're looking for that acceptance from other people. And I think that was a huge thing for me, because I didn't get immediate love and acceptance, like from my family and my close circle coming out. I looked for that in my partners going forward.
Yeah.
And I made them responsible for how I felt. And if I wasn't happy in the relationship, it was clearly something they had done, right? Because it could not be my fault.
I can relate to that. I mean, that is really at the core of now we know we can put a name on that, right? Like what Erin just described is love addiction, is codependency. Yep. I think that was one of the biggest things you said. You said, thank you for giving me a name for this, because I mean, I know for me, I thought it was crazy, Erin. Like I thought, like, okay, so I am not who I think my parents, or those that, by the way, caregivers, I was raised by, Nana, Papa, my uncle, etc. I didn't feel loved. And so I then sought it from other people, because that's what I was taught, is I'm not okay unless Nana, Papa, Mom, Dad, my uncle say that I'm okay.
Yep.
And then, okay, so I just continue to keep looking to other people to ensure that I'm okay. So I want to go back to something that you said, because I think, there's people who span, listening to this podcast, who span from the still acting out, still sleeping with people, or still flirting with people and getting their love and attention. There's people who are like in between, who are like, oh, I'm sick of this shit, but like, I really want to up level my life, and I really want to love myself, but I want to go back. And then there's those that are where I think you and I are, which is, we've spent the time, we've done the work, we've gotten the therapy, we've done the coaching, we've done the things. And now you never graduate, by the way, right? I think we all know this. It's like, oh, this is just awareness. Now it's like, okay, what do I continue to do to maintain that? Because I know for me, Erin, I can go back into thinking about fantasy land of life with my 19-year-old boyfriend. Versus now, like, oh, I wonder if the grass is greener on the other side. I mean, it's dangerous territory. But I want to go back to something you said, that I think no matter where you are in those phases, I think it's something that we also, and I use the word desperately because I think it's true, we all desperately want, is learning how to love ourselves.
Totally.
I know this is such a longer conversation, but like, what was your journey with that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, when you were describing the people that are listening to this podcast right now, I was definitely in the I'm sick of this shit phase,
Mm.
and so I can say now, happily that I'm kind of out of the mess of the thick of things of like this, like slap in the face, dagger in the heart of like, oh my God, you have to change and it's up to you. That was
Mm.
huge for me. And it was so emotionally exhausting. But, I guess side note, there's hope. Definitely. If I can do it, anybody can do it. Yeah.
Same. I like that we keep it real. Like this will be emotionally exhausting. But when you get through the other side of it, I remember the day. I remember exactly where I was standing when you got to the other side of it. And I was like, I told you it was coming. Like there's just
Yeah.
this like gorilla just all of a sudden like got off your back and like hopped to another tree. And you're just like, oh my God, the emotional weight is off.
But before that, I mean, I can't even describe, like, being uncomfortable doesn't even do it justice. I remember, I will never forget the day that I was trying not to text my ex, and I was pacing around the living room and I was talking out loud to myself, and I had my windows open. I swear if like my neighbors walked by, they would think I was so crazy. But I was crying and I was pacing and I was like, I don't know what to do. And I was like shaking my hands, going like, this is so uncomfortable. It's so incredibly uncomfortable. But it's like, it was totally new. It was completely different than how I had operated up until that point. And it was like, I committed to changing my life this way. I have to go through the hard stuff. You can't avoid it anymore, Erin. You can't, the thinking that you're, cool as a cucumber, which, by the way, when you said, let's put a name to it, it's codependency, it's love addiction. I also had that with people pleasing, that I thought that I was always laid back. I'm like, of my friends group, I'm cool as a cucumber, go with the flow equals people pleasing. And I didn't understand until I gave it a name that I had even become resentful for the people that were taking advantage of me because I let them say and do whatever they wanted. And I was getting mad. I'm like, you're taking advantage of me, but I was letting it happen.
Yeah.
That's so huge. So I know we got off topic here and you asked me a question and I forgot what it was.
It was about how did you love yourself? But you started to go down that path. You said I had to go through the tough stuff. I want to go there first, actually, before we go into how do you love yourself. So what was
Sure.
tough about it? Because I think this is the fear that people, okay, let me preface this by saying the woman who is, or the person who is sick and tired and going, okay, I'm done. I'm not doing this no more. Like, I'm over it. I think she's fully surrendered to the fact that like, I'm going to feel pain. Let's go through it. But I do know that there are people that listen to this podcast and who have actually been on the phone with me and said, what if it's hard? So like, what was hard about it? What, in terms of feeling your feelings, and like, what would you describe as hard?
So for me, it was the distrust in myself. I didn't know, I just knew that I didn't want to feel, quote unquote, and I say that in air quotes, negative feelings, because feeling sad sucks. Feeling lonely sucks. Feeling depressed or not enough or mad and aggressive, whatever, like those, like I say, quote unquote, negative feelings, like it's hard. And for me, I made it mean something about me. Like whenever I was feeling sad or lonely or whatever, it meant that I sucked at being in a relationship. I didn't know who I was. I was never going to be happy. I was never going to be a successful trainer. I was never going to be able to help people, get through their humps either, because I'm a phony. There was this total imposter syndrome too with that. And that, for me, the hard part was thinking that a negative, quote unquote, feeling or a challenging feeling, that feeling lonely or that feeling insecure, meant that I didn't deserve love, or I didn't deserve success, or I didn't deserve to be in my family because I was a shitty daughter. I didn't deserve to have the friends I have because I wasn't there for them like they were for me, or whatever. I could cook up any scenario. And it was the thoughts that I had and the feelings that I had, or the feelings that I had that turned into thoughts that made me believe that that's who I was, and that was hard.
I totally agree. I mean, I think when we talked about earlier, that moment that I remember where all of a sudden the gorilla got off your back is that moment where all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, I'm in control of the stories I'm telling myself. And it's not that the loneliness fades or the like frustration within yourself. It's all of a sudden this like breaking point where you're like, oh fuck, I'm totally in control of my own thoughts. And I can totally trust that God, higher power, universe, whatever it is totally going to take care of me if I continue to go through my feelings, not around my feelings. And I think that was like one of your biggest aha moments. And I think two questions here, but let's focus on the first one, which is like, so how did you get to love yourself? Like, what did that process look like for you?
Yeah, for me, and absolutely, turning that switch was you showing me that none of these feelings were permanent. And I knew that, but it was like, I never paid attention to that before. It's like, when you're mad, you're not mad forever. You quote unquote, get over it. You know what I mean? When you're happy, you're not happy forever. It's just, it ebbs and flows, and it's a constant, transition all day, day, you know what I mean? Of just this, like, sometimes you're happy and sometimes you're sad, but before I made it mean that like I was manic or something, I was like, something wrong with me, because like some days I'm happy and some days I don't want to do this. Some days I want to get out of bed, but that's life. That's just how it is, And so for me, like, learning to love myself was, I had spent all this time searching for, I don't want to say authenticity from other people, and love and connection and all of this stuff, and realizing that like I could give that to myself, because all I wanted was to not feel crazy and be seen for who I was. But then it was like, Erin, you don't even know who you are. So how can you expect that, So it's like, okay, cool. Start with me. And it's like, it's so silly because I remember posting, there's a scene in The Lion King where Rafiki, the wise old monkey, is like, you don't even know who you are. And I was like, that was my favorite as a kid, by the way. We're talking about 90s here. But that's really what it was. And it's like, before, when we talked, before we started recording this podcast, it was like your intentions of today. And it was to really be seen for who I am and not be judged for it, and not feeling like you have to change for anyone, and to me, that's what letting love in means, is that I want that for myself, that I want to be seen for who I am. I don't want anyone to feel like they have to change me, that I'm not good enough, how I show up authentically as me. And on the flip side of that, I don't want to do that to anyone I'm dating or anyone in my personal life or my parents or my clients or anything. I want to be able to be a safe space for you, that you can show up authentically who you are. And you don't have to feel like I'm judging you, I'm changing you, none of that. Like, that to me is the ultimate letting love in.
That is so powerful. And truth be told, I think so many people think that it's about letting someone else love you. And it really is the age-old saying of like, you have to know yourself, trust yourself, be able to learn how to love and accept yourself, whether you're a little loud or a little soft or whatever it may be, that you're never too much for anybody. And I know, I gave you the guidance, very similar to the guidance that I received when I realized that I was dependent on other people to love and accept me. Is the guidance that I had given you is, okay, so let's take a look at who those people are in your life. Let's bucket them into no contact, minimal contact, safe and trusted. And let's start to dissect who Erin is in each one of those relationships. And let's keep the focus on the safe and trusted people, so that if you choose to take the people who are in the, oh, not best to have contact with right now, slash kind of sort of maybe okay, like a mom kind of scenario, is how do you then move them into the safe and trusted bucket? Which, funny enough, your ex ended up becoming into the safe and trusted bucket. And I think deep down, talking about learning to trust yourself, I think you knew that all along. But there was so much that, and I know this was true for me, is the fantasy of what I thought life was going to be like with some of those people who I had to place in the no contact bucket.
Yeah.
Was determining and dictating how I felt about myself. It was no fault of them, by the way. They didn't, I mean, yeah, sure. Did they have their shit? Yeah, of course they did.
Yeah,
like
right.
in my life, right? They had their shit, but it was what I was making them mean about me. And I remember I had this friend who was a big shopper, loved to go out to dinner. Parents had a ton of money. And every time I'd leave an interaction with her, I always felt like I wasn't good enough. I had so much fun when we were together, but the moment I would leave, I'd start to shop. I'd start to reach out to former sex partners. Like I used to just try to fill that hole. And, you know, fortunately, God does for you what you can't do for yourself. I wasn't able to put her into the bucket of no contact. I tried to push the square peg through the round hole and make her safe and trusted. And God was like, just kidding. She's not.
No.
The read receipt is on. She read the message. She ain't responded. You know what I mean? Like I was like, oh shit. Okay. Yeah. And I got to tell you that, and I know you went through that journey too. And really looking at those relationships with parents, caregivers, family members, your former, exes, things like that. And really looking at, okay, like, how can I take all the pieces and parts that I want for them to love me, and how can I do that for myself?
Yeah.
And I feel like a big part of that is when you go through what's called withdrawal, right? Which is the withdrawal of, I can't go to the candy store to get candy from them anymore. So I got to go get the candy within. It's like, talk to me a little bit about what that process was. And not everybody goes through that process, but I know for you and I, that was our process. We had to, man.
The withdrawal was so real. Oof. Definitely. Yeah. And with, I love that you brought that up about the getting your dopamine hit from whatever it is. Some people it's booze, some people it's sex. For me, it was love, and sex as well. But it could be anything, you know what I mean? Some people do it with food. It's just, it is what it is. Like there's
people do it with everything.
With everything, all of the above, right? Check yes, check all of the above, right? And it's like some people do it with just like withdrawing. You know what I mean? I've seen that too. Like I've had a friend who it's like anything challenging happens, you don't hear from her for a week.
Yeah, and it's I have a friend like that.
Yeah,
ooh, I used to have
and it's wild. It's really wild, and it's pretty cool to like look back and to have the awareness to be able to identify those things and go, oh, okay, well, Susie does this when this, and then Brett does this with this, or, whatever. It's just, it's so wild. But the searching for that dopamine hit from that addiction, I had zero idea that I was doing that. And it was this dependency on, to kind of dive a little bit more into what codependency looked like for me, was if there was like a fight with an ex or anything. I mean, let's just like, if anything would happen, and even if it was good, I just got a promotion or a client signed on for, X amount of dollars, or I did this cool thing on my own that I didn't think I would do or that I could do, I would go to that person and be like, look at this. I would like dump all my shit on them and going like, isn't this cool? Aren't I so worthy? Aren't you so proud of me? And then on the reverse end, it would be, I'm feeling so bad. Can you just make me feel better? Give me sex, give me love, rub my back, whatever, like all the things that I wanted. And by the way, I was communicating none of it.
Oh, right. Because we have the expectations in our head.
Totally.
But we never communicate any of it to them.
Nothing.
This is Erin and Katie 1.0. right?
Yes,
Because
this is
2.0, now we're like, can you rub my back? I'm feeling very
we're
needy
so
right now.
cool. Yeah, totally. I'm a total guru now.
No, now
No, but
expert. I actually took expert like out of everything that other people had written for me. And I was like, please take expert out. We are experienced. That's all we are.
yes, right. I've been through the trenches. Put that on my resume. But yeah, I would expect that, like I said, it was that searching for validation from my partner. And when I wouldn't get it, I would be upset, and I would get resentful. And it was like, you never do anything for me. And, blah, 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 blah. The terms can go on, you know what I mean? And then I would kind of withdraw a little bit. And that went into a vicious cycle for years. And then finally, it was to this point, like I said, mid-pandemic, about a year ago, that I was like, this is enough. I can't do this anymore. And realizing through the guidance of, obviously, of you and of ACA as well, that this novel concept of self-soothing, you can do that, and being aware of, okay, when you're triggered, when you're feeling lonely, or when you're feeling, you want to celebrate something, like, what are those feelings that you're searching for? Like, what's coming up, and what are the thoughts that are, coming up with that as well? And can you do that for yourself? And
That is
most
so
of the
well said.
time,
I'm sorry.
yeah, most of the time for me, it was, yes, I can do that for myself, because I put so much weight on my partner to do those things for me. And when they didn't, because again, I wasn't communicating that to them, I'd be like, well, then I'm never going to feel good, or I'm never going to be celebrated, or whatever,
Yeah, I get that so deeply. And I was actually thinking about recently. So for those of you who don't know, ACA is Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Homes. I literally recommend it to every single person I know. You don't get any kickbacks. There's no referrals. There's none of that shit.
Nope.
It's literally a free group of people coming together who grew up. And let's face it, we all grew up with dysfunction.
Absolutely. Yep.
Our grandparents grew up in the Great Depression. Of course, it's like the pandemic on steroids. Okay.
Yeah.
And then our parents, God love them, tried to learn from them. Okay, a little bit crazy. And then they passed along to us. And so no wonder why. And I think what I say this frequently is that the buck stops with us. We were like, all right, enough is enough. I'm sick and tired of this shit. And so, you touched on a couple of things. I think one, I realized recently that, I'm always going to be on this journey of self-soothing. And that there are some days I do it better than others. Like yesterday, for example, was a day where I was on my phone constantly and I wasn't really doing anything. I was just removing the notifications off my phone. And it was like, why am I looking at my phone this much? And I remember, therapist I had worked with, she said, I think you're becoming a little dependent on your boyfriend to self-soothe you, because when I'm operating at 11, the moment we're together, I'm down at a 4, I'm falling asleep on his chest. I don't really fall asleep a lot of places except for moving car in the passenger seat or a plane. And, really looking at that, like, okay, so where's the franticness coming from? Where am I still operating at such a high level that I'm not actually able to soothe myself, because what am I afraid of? And I want to go back to something you said earlier, which is that every day is so different. I remember one of the conversations you and I had, you had asked about morning routines. And I said, I know studies show, and God love her, Oprah says it. And if Oprah says it, then it must be, must be God's word, is that having a consistent practice of a morning routine is wonderful, and it means that you're successful. And I disagree with that, actually. I think, and I shared this with you, I think as women, and now that I'm understanding women's cycles, right, is that this world was based off a 24-hour cycle of a man, because a man can literally wake up every day at 5 and work out every day at 5 with consistency, and their moods don't really change, right? Well, they do, but you get where I'm going here. Is that with women, we have a 28-day cycle. Some of us ovulate, some of us don't. Regardless of that, I think what's interesting is that I choose to teach this, is that every day is different. And so if one day, Monday, you need to wake up and do a gratitude list, but on Friday, you need to go for a run, then you do you, boo. Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter, just as long as you're doing something that's moving you in the direction of self-love and care. So I want to shift gears here as we kind of
Yeah.
wrap up and talk about, like, what has transformed in your life now. Like, you said something really profound to me when I was like, tell me what's up. How are things going with your not so ex anymore, who's now your girlfriend? Like, tell me how
Mhm.
things are at work. I'd love for you to share with people as much as you feel comfortable sharing, like, what's all the good shit that's happening. But then I loved what you said, which is like, but even when the good shit's not happening, I'm able to actually just feel my feelings and
Yeah.
recognize, like, where do I need to give myself a little love and attention. So riff, babe.
Yes.
Tell us
Yeah. Oh,
all that's gone down.
yeah. So absolutely. So at least with my relationship, yeah, we decided, so we took some time off where we weren't communicating at all. And that was very important, albeit that I have to probably put a little caveat in here that that was one of the hardest things that I've ever done in my whole life. I've torn my ACL, I've had reconstructive knee surgery, like all sorts of crazy stuff, but like not talking to my ex was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do, ever.
Mm.
And so we decided to get back together after, a journey, and both of us, quite frankly. Um, and we are communicating so much more effectively. Number one, I think just for the mere fact that I'm able to identify my feelings, like what's going on here. And I'm not saying that like, oh, it's so perfect, it's sunshine and rainbows and we never fight. And that's not true. We've been back together for like 2 months now, and we've had, a few disagreements, arguments, whatever you want to call them. But it's like, okay, what's going on here? What's the story I'm telling myself about what is happening here? And then what's the truth? Because they're never
Mm.
the same. Never. Like we would fight, and then the story I would tell myself was, well, she doesn't love me and she didn't even really want to get back together with me and blah 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 blah, and it's like you say that out loud and you're like, that's so silly. And your partner's like, what? Like, where are you getting that from? That's not even, no, not even close. But yes, it's, we are two very different people, and I love that about us. We cope in different ways with things as well, but the biggest thing for us and for me to, and the reason that that relationship is successful now is because we are being authentically who we are, and we ask each other, what do you need from me? And the other person gets to answer, can I give that to you or not? Is that something that I'm prepared to give you either today and tomorrow, or forever? You know what I mean? Because it's
Mm.
different every day, and one of the big things too that we kind of laugh about, and I don't know where one of us heard this, but 90%, I would say, of arguments previously started with either someone wanting only to vent or wanting only solutions, and the other person would give the other thing. So we ask each other now, if someone's venting, hey, can I tell you this thing that happened today? Or can you believe this? Or what? The other person goes, do you want solutions or do you want comfort?
Mm.
And to me, that's a game changer, because it's like nothing's worse. I want to say nothing, but nothing's worse than when like you're just venting about someone and someone like starts telling you like, oh yeah, you should do this or you should do that. And you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. That was
Yeah, you're
not
like,
even, I literally was just talking about that person I work with, saying like, can you believe Sally? Or, it's like,
right,
where are you
right. You're
coming up
like,
with
I
all of
wasn't
this?
looking for advice. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. But again, being aware of what you need in that moment and in that time. And can I give that to myself? And one of the things that you taught me too was your partner doesn't have to be the sounding board for everything in your life. And I will ask myself, if something happened at work, for instance, or with a client or whatever, I take time with it and I pause and I kind of, roll it over in my head going, all right, what's the story I'm telling myself about this? Is it true? No. Okay, cool. Can I soothe myself? And a big game changer for me too, and I am kind of going back a little bit too, was the things that were soothing. I had to spend time with what things were actually soothing to me versus what things weren't. And like we hear about self-care all the time, and it's like, For me, like taking a bath really wasn't that soothing, but like doing a DIY project was, so I had to spend time learning to love myself, of paying attention to what things actually soothed me and what things didn't. Like for me, having a glass of wine after a stressful day wasn't actually as soothing as I thought it would be, as it sounds. I'm like, well, I'm actually just kind of buzzed and now I'm emotional. So this isn't really helping.
This isn't really helping. It's so true.
Yeah.
And I think you touched on so many great points, but with the time we have left too, I wanted to talk about your career and what has sort of transpired. And, I hope so many people can relate to the story that you're sharing, but I would love to open it up to the audience that if they feel called to reach out to you for nutrition and fitness, that you do virtual sessions, which is really incredible. But I know, our work together really prompted me to take a really big look at that. All of my private clients, about 95% of them, yourself included, are entrepreneurs. And that half the time we were talking about love and the other half we were talking about business, which is why I started to create 2 programs for that, because I was like, oh shit, like in my private coaching, everybody gets to talk about whatever the hell they want, but then we can divide it out. And you started to have some really big aha moments about your own career and how you were showing up. And I know that one of the things that you started to do is, when you were having something go down in business and you were trying to figure out, I'm going to move my prices or start contracts or things like that, being able to reach out to safe and trusted people. So like, as much as there's the element of self-soothing, I think the next question becomes, well, who else do I know that it can either relate to this or is willing to be a sounding board that isn't necessarily my partner all the time? But what kind of aha moments came from your career and your passion and your purpose? Because I know there were some big ones.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. So for me, I mean, the biggest one for me was I completely, I wouldn't say change, but went back years to a type of client that I was training before. So I was in professional business groups early on in the pandemic as well, because I shifted from in-person training to a 100% virtual business. And I didn't know what any of that meant. And so for me, it really was diving into what feels authentic to you, because it's exhausting when you're giving and giving and giving and giving to your clients. And then how do you recharge your own batteries? And I found that I was just getting drained and drained and drained. And it was like the money was coming in and it was cool. And I had plenty to live and, I can pay my bills with some extra and be a little bit frivolous, but I wasn't like really feeling satisfied. And I had to dig deep and go, is it something about that clientele that isn't serving you? What really is the key for you? And for me, I totally shifted from, kind of older adults who have had like orthopedic injuries, who've had like a knee replacement or things like that, which I still very do much cherish in my heart because I went through that as well. And, fast forward my life, 30 years into here's the things I'm going to be dealing with, when I'm 60 or when I'm, 70. But getting back to what really is in my heart of the people with catastrophic injuries. So I spent time working back a few years ago in an in-person setting with people with traumatic brain injuries and spinal cord injuries and who have had strokes and things like that, and found this giant gap in our ever beloved healthcare system of, if you have a stroke, you go into therapy. And then after a couple of weeks, they're like, okay, cool, you're good. Like, go ahead and on and live your life. Like you've gotten the best that you can get. And it's like, oh, no. Like these people need care for the rest of their lives and they need movement and practical movement. And frankly, like longevity are concerns for them. Practicality are concerns for them.
Nutrition,
absolutely. And just being met where they are, because there's this huge gap between healthcare and physical therapy and then personal training. So it's like, in my experience, I've been a personal trainer for 15 years and not one person taught me in any of my personal training, certification or schooling, how to work with someone who wasn't, and I say, quote unquote, apparently healthy. And it's like, nobody teaches you how to work with people with spinal cord injuries. Nobody teaches you how to work. And that's why I fell in love in the hospital system with clients like that, and meeting them with motivation. And quite frankly, like the biggest thing for me is the vulnerability. So now that I have done the personal work to be more vulnerable, I can bring that into my clients and go, Sally Sue, I get it that yesterday you were totally cool, but today you woke up and you feel like crap. That's cool. That's going to completely change how we work out today and what foods you're going to eat today. And that's totally acceptable. And it's like, nobody really thinks on their toes like that.
No, not unless you've done this inner work of really understanding like what not only do you need, but then also seeing it in somebody else and having compassion. I mean, you light up like a Christmas tree. And so when you talk about this, and I'm so glad that you were able to find your, recalibrate your purpose and get back to actually, it's funny how for you, the last thing I'll say is that with your ex and the way that you first started training, you've gone back. Like you started to get away from the whispers of your heart and then went back and said, no, this feels in alignment. So we're out of time and I could probably talk to you for another hour, but I just wanted to wrap up by saying thank you, Erin. Like I'm so grateful that you trusted me to do this work with one another. I've learned so much from you as I know that you have with me. I think that's the beautiful part of having a coaching relationship, and that also that, to just be so candid and raw today and tell people exactly how you feel. Like I know without a doubt that you're helping at least one, if not more. And I know I got something out of today as well. So we'll just go ahead and add two. But how can people find you if they want to work and coach with you?
So you can find me on Instagram at Erin Szar, ERINSZAR, or you can go to my website, which is www.szarfitness. So SZAR and then fitness.com.
My gosh, you guys, she brings as much energy to the podcast as she does her coaching. So with that being said, you guys, in health and happiness, much love.
Yeah.